Climate change, man-made disaster. When it comes to man-made disasters, climate change is one of the biggest examples. Climate change can be thought of as a change of climate patterns. Simply put, the Earth either being in a state of hotter or colder conditions. The reason we believe it's man-made is because of the contribution of people to the issue of climate change. We alone contribute about 90 to 100% to climate change, and unfortunately, for the worse. As we simply live our lives, we rapidly heat the planet. Things as simple as agriculture can heavily affect the climate, and these are normal things we do just to live. The global temperature has risen by 1 degree Celsius since 1880, which is a huge jump with disastrous consequences. Today I aim to talk about some of the biggest contributing factors towards climate change. Variation in the sun's intensity. A more natural contribution to climate change would be variation in the sun's intensity. The sun has an 11-year sunspot cycle, which can impact the global climate. A lack of sunspots means the Earth can experience cold spells, in which the climate is much cooler. With an abundance of sunspots, the climate will be warmer, often most noticed in hotter days of the year. Being a more natural contributor, the sunspot cycle doesn't pose much of a threat to Earth. As the contributors become more and more man-made, you start to see some problems. Industrial activity. Ever since the Industrial Revolution, carbon emissions have skyrocketed. The use of fossil fuels as a source of energy quickly spread across the world. Factories began burning coal as a means to accumulate energy, but as the coal burned, the Earth suffered. Carbon was released at a steady rate, but it wasn't just factories that utilized fossil fuels. The invention of automobiles that use gasoline meant more carbon was released to the atmosphere. Industrial activity has contributed to 22% of the total greenhouse gas emissions from 2018. Today it stands as one of the most impactful contributors to climate change. Agricultural activity. Agricultural activity can be thought of as our method of producing food. Unfortunately, our process isn't without its contributions towards climate change. Probably the most impactful part of food production is meat production. The cows we harvest for food outnumber the human population and constantly produce methane throughout the day. Cows produce about 220 pounds of methane each year. While it doesn't last as long as carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, it's thought to be 28 times more potent, making them the biggest factor in agricultural contribution. The use of synthetic fertilizers also contribute by releasing nitrous oxide into the atmosphere. As we require more and more food, the amount released continues to increase. Deforestation. With the constant need for lumber, farming land, and living space brings the destruction of forests and jungles. Not only does this destroy fragile ecosystems, it also destroys the environment. Trees are our natural defenders in a sense. They take the carbon dioxide in the air and use it to produce oxygen. But as we clear more and more land, we ultimately get rid of what's keeping us from heating up the planet and what keeps us alive. These acts of deforestation also work with agriculture, since much of the land cleared turned into farmland, causing a dramatic increase in carbon and methane emissions. Natural feedback loop. Another more natural occurring contribution to climate change is the Earth's natural feedback loop. There are two types of feedback. Positive feedback is feedback that increases initial warming, and negative feedback is feedback that decreases initial warming. Clouds have an enormous impact on the climate and fall under a positive feedback loop. Clouds reflect about 1/3 of the total sunlight that hits Earth back into space. Warmer climates increase the amount of clouds produced, which ultimately affects how much heat the Earth absorbs. And since it steadily increases, so does the amount of heat absorbed. Final thoughts. Since our climate is in disrepair, it's up to us to fix the climate issue. The best we can do is reduce our carbon footprint. Try to turn off lights as soon as you're done using them. Take the bus or carpool with friends to burn less gas, and limit the amount of meat products you consume. Most importantly, we should advocate for cleaner energy sources, such as solar and wind power. It's up to us to fix the problems we've created. It'll take some time, but we should do all we can. To conclude this climate change PSA, I decided to interview both of my parents and ask them a few questions. Let's see what they have to say. How do you think climate change is impacting us?
Well, right now, there's obviously some regional stuff. Maybe we have a few more hurricanes. Maybe the crops in a couple places will fail. I think if anything, we're just on the edge of it right now. And that's why a lot of people think there's nothing to it. But
Okay. Do you feel climate change is a real threat to human beings?
I definitely think it's a threat to people regionally. I don't think we're going to be wiped out by it or anything like that. I do think it's a political problem. There might be some conflicts and wars or migrations. It just kind of depends on which region gets hit and how the politics work out. I think we could work through it smoothly, but the world the way it's set up now, it's not like people welcome other people in other countries or think of everybody's in the same bucket together. So I think there'll be a lot of problems because of that. And best case scenario, we come out the end having to do that and maybe learn something about it. I don't think people are going to get wiped out. Like I said, I think a lot of animals will die. There'll be a lot of disruption. It'll be a hard lesson. It's a hard lesson to learn, even though we already know what's coming.
How do you think climate change is impacting us?
Well, I know that it's getting warmer and warmer over the years, which makes it sometimes unbearable for the people that live in the United States and other countries. It can also lead to weather changes that make it difficult for people.
Do you feel climate change is a real threat to human beings?
Yeah, I think it is a threat to human beings. I worry that the increased temperatures might impact their ability to grow crops and feed people both in the United States and any places that we export food. It's a real concern to me.